to talk about. Thank you. They heard me. Okay. So we're going to talk about the French Broad River, and some of you can click that. Got it. So it will go away. Can you? Oh, Catherine. Okay. Well, let's see if I can go forward, and I can't until somebody clicks it. Oh, there's Catherine. Oh, do I hit a key? My rescue. Oh, I can hit it. Ooh.
Let's see if it's dancing with Raleigh.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Oh, sorry, I got to do it here.
You can do it there. Just try it once and see if it goes.
Okay. Oh, it does. It does. Okay. So all my technical help. So thank you. We are part of the Sierra Club, which is the Big Guys in the Sky National. Our big brothers who are in Raleigh, they are called chapter people. They're in North Carolina. And we're the important people, excuse me. We are Western North Carolina. And we send out emails every other Saturday. So if you're not getting them under my name, which is Judy Maddox, please go to our website, which is wncSierraClub.org. So just WNC Sierra Club. But first thing I want to acknowledge our wonderful ancestors, the Cherokee, who have preserved this land, kept it, loved it, and passed it on to us and them. So we are acknowledging our love for them and the land that we all, that's why we're here. So picnic, what I was telling you, next month. So it's not going to be the first Wednesday here. It's going to be the third Saturday there at Woodfin Riverside Park. And we'd love to have all of you. And it will be noon to 3. Please bring a potluck dish to share. Please label it of all the ingredients, because various people are allergic to various things like nuts or eggs or cheese or whatever. And please bring something to put on a grill. We're going to have a portable grill that we will fire up. We will have badminton and we will have music. So bring your dancing shoes. I'm just kidding. There's not really a dance venue, but we'll have some old-timey music, and we're right on the river, and it is gorgeous. Please do not bring dogs. It's kind of a small, not small. We can handle probably 50, 60 people at the picnic, but not really dogs, but please bring children. We can handle little guys. Please don't throw them in the river, because we're going to talk about the river being partially impaired, and what we can do about that. How many of you think you'll come to the picnic? Oh, look at you. Yes. Okay. Do bring your tennis shoes or whatever to play badminton. That would be great. Okay, so I'm already telling you that we are, look at us, big guys. We're in person, we're online, and we have switched from Thursday, as you know, we're to Saturday, and we are here. This is really for the people at home. We've got lots of people at home right now. So our next program after the picnic will be the first Wednesday in August. It will be August 2nd here in person, and it will be on the Inflation Reduction Act. Will be a wonderful presenter from Greenbelt Alliance. His name is Jamie Wise. Yes, and he's quite knowledgeable. And he's going to tell you how to save money on buying your EV car, how to get, heat pump, how to save money and how to save the environment, the world. That's what we're all about. So for tonight, here we are, and I'm going to stop talking and introduce. I've already told these two wonderful ladies. This is Lisa Raleigh. She is the big guy. She's the ED, Executive Director of RiverLink. And I've told Renee that she is the Wonder Woman of the water. So she's going to tell you all about the French Broad. So people at home, put your questions online in the chat and we will read them at the end. And you guys hold your question. You will raise your hand and you need to get a microphone before you ask your question. So without further ado, these two wonderful super women.
Are you live?
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Judy, thank you so much. And Ken, thank you for inviting us and having us. We really appreciate it. I am Lisa Raleigh, and I'm the executive director. And I landed here just shy of 2 years ago from Colorado. And I'm with my fabulous colleague.
Renee Fortner. I'm the Watershed Resources Manager at RiverLink, and I've been with RiverLink almost 8 years now. Been in Asheville since '97, and I grew up in Western North Carolina. And I'm an ecologist by training.
So incredible, knowledgeable resource. And we're psyched to talk today or this evening about the French Broad River watershed and just the past, present, and future from RiverLink's kind of lens and timeline. So I'll kick us off and I'll take us through the past. Renee and I will kind of tag team the present, and then Renee will really speak to the future and things that we can do to really make a difference. So we'll get going, and then we look forward to questions at the end. So the French Broad River itself is pretty extraordinary. This is one of the things that really drew me to this position and to this region. It's pretty mind-boggling, but it is one of the oldest rivers in the world.
That's right. Many consider it to be the third oldest river in the world, behind the Nile being the oldest, and then the New River, ironically, the second oldest river in the world, and also in Western North Carolina.
Wow, I never thought about that nomenclature, but okay,
Yeah.
That is extraordinary. But it is amazing to think of this incredibly ancient geology and geography that the French Broad flows through. It's also really novel in that it flows north. And I mean, a handful of rivers do, but it's not common and it's not intuitive because its headwaters are down south. And so whenever you just talk about it, its orientation is pretty unique. Here in Cragnolan Park has the Wrong Way campground and resort across from us. And those guys are paddlers that named it after the French Broad because they say she flows the wrong way. It's a large watershed in Western North Carolina. It serves almost 500,000 people across 8 counties. Most of that population is going to be in Buncombe and Henderson County. The French Broad itself is a couple 100 miles long. It flows north. It briefly joins the Holston, connects with the Tennessee, the Ohio, and ultimately back down to the Mississippi. So, you know, those headwaters down in Transylvania County do a big loop and end up back down in the Gulf of Mexico. As you were sharing, Judy, it was very important and is very important to the Cherokee. They had have a special relationship with it and have beautiful names for it. It also anchored so much of Wilma Dykeman's life. She wrote a book directly to it. She was so ahead of her time in the 40s, speaking about social justice and environmentalism and the French Broad in particular. So it's really been held, I think, iconically through Wilma's words. And then unfortunately, it's really well known in history for the flood of 1916. And when you think about the area, prior to 1916, the railroad came in the late 1800s. And with it comes all that development and commerce and marketplace. And so the river corridor was just thriving, right? There was all kinds of business down there, and people were down there. And it was a real, mecca at the time. But the flood was so catastrophic. We talk about this. RiverLink's building is down in the River Arts District, and we are a block or 2 off the river, and that watermark on our building from this flood is where relative to you?
It's like a couple feet above my head.
So
So yeah, when the Asheville trolley tours go past our building, they slow down and you can hear the host or the tour guide talking about the high water line that's painted on RiverLink's building. And it's like 8 feet up on the building, which is incredible.
So to give a sense of how catastrophic that flood was. So following it, everyone retreated up from there, right? And so what was left behind was more of industry and a lot of damage from the flood. So fast forward to the 80s, and this is where RiverLink's timeline comes in. Early and mid 80s, Asheville itself has a lot of deferred infrastructure and a struggling city center. Who in here lived in Asheville like in the earlier mid 80s? Handful. So like boarded up buildings, right? Kind of a re-emerging. and a pretty huge disconnect from the river. At this point, the river, from an environmental perspective, is really heavily polluted. There's active industry, there's dilapidated industry, and it might as well be metaphorically thousands of miles from the city, when in reality, it's
Maybe a half mile from downtown, if that.
so. Here come the women of the watershed. On the heels of Wilma, Jean Webb, simply extraordinary. She becomes this unbelievable, just environmentalist and activist and champion. And Karen Craig Nolan arrives in, like, I think, is it 87? And Karen's coming with her husband from Dubai, where she was actually involved in the Chamber of Commerce, which speaks to what a powerful, extraordinary woman Karen was, that in Dubai at that time, she could have that kind of role. So when she lands in Asheville, she's immediately drawn to the river. And she finds herself at the chamber, who is embarking on a One More Day campaign, because at that time, when people visited Asheville, they would come for a day to see the Biltmore Estate, but there wasn't a lot more tourism reason to hold them. And so through this partnership between Jean and Karen and the chamber, RiverLink is founded. And this is such a bold, visionary time. Like, I think of David, we talk about this. This is when the Riverway Plan and ultimately the Wilma Dykeman Greenway Plan, like, these visions were born for this extensive series of river parks and greenways that were going to connect. And at the time, they were so aspirational relative to the circumstances. And today, when you look at those plans, they are like a guiding light or a North Star. And so much of it that has been accomplished. So it was just an incredible, incredible time that these guys all came together and had a vision for what Asheville and its relationship with the river could be. So in all that, RiverLink's mission is founded, and it's a little unique for a conservation organization, because it has that dual mission to promote both the environmental and the economic vitality of the French Broad River and its watershed.
Yeah, and our mission really was inspired by Wilma Dykeman and things that she said in her book, The French Broad, about how the environment and the economy are not exclusive. You can have a thriving economy, but you can also have a healthy environment if you're smart about the way you develop your economy and you protect the resources like the French Broad River.
And with that economic vitality, a lot more people can become very interested and become big advocates for the environment. So we feel like almost 35 years later, this mission is still really relevant today. So that brings us to the present. And this has been, I'm sorry, dear. Renee's going to talk a little bit about what makes us so unique here. And then we're going to touch on kind of a conundrum that has come our region's way.
Yeah, so we talked about how heavily polluted the river was at one time, largely due to industry and untreated runoff, that it was perfectly legal for industry to dump their wastewater into the river. And so we fast forward to today, where, you know, we have the Clean Water Act in place. It's no longer legal to straight pipe your septic system into the river, and the industry's gone from the riverfront. But the river still has problems, and the problems have transitioned from that industrial pollution to the negative consequences of a development boom that we're experiencing here in Asheville. And so with that development comes more rooftops, driveways, parking lots, hard surfaces. We refer to those as impervious surfaces that don't allow rainwater to soak into the ground and recharge our groundwater. Instead, those hard surfaces shoot the water across the landscape. And a lot of people don't realize, but in our urban areas, the water that enters the storm drains, that enters the sanitary stormwater system below ground, and that series of pipes send that water directly into the nearest stream and ultimately into the French Broad River. So that water isn't treated. And so you can imagine just this large volume of water that's flowing across the hard surfaces, picking up sediment, bacteria, litter, among other pollutants, and then it's delivering it directly to the French Broad River.
So last year, a pair of extraordinary events coincided. One had to do with the French Broad River Partnership, which is this awesome consortium of nonprofits and government entities and businesses and river outfitters. They ended up in a 2-year economic study because they wanted to figure out the valuation of the French Broad River watershed to this region. And this got kind of hung up in COVID, and so it took longer to get, but they did an incredible job with Dr. Ha from Western Carolina University. But the results were shocking. It came back that this French Broad River and its associated watershed brings $3.8 billion annually to the region. And that number eclipses the Blue Ridge Parkway's last number or the Great Smoky Mountain National Park number. So all of a sudden, there's this quantifiable evidence that Asheville and the surrounding region as we know it today is built on the economic backbone of this river and this watershed. But
Almost simultaneously, this news comes across that the state of North Carolina Division of Water Resources has designated a 19-mile section of the French Broad River that flows through the heart of Asheville as impaired. Many of you have probably heard about this, but it's listed as impaired for fecal coliform bacteria. So on many days, most frequently, it's going to be after a heavy rain. The French Broad River, the coliform levels are higher than what the EPA considers safe for swimming. Where is all of this bacteria coming from? You know, unfortunately, it isn't one source that we can point to because then it would be fairly simple to solve. The sources are varied and it's widespread, but you know, we know that livestock that have access to streams are a major source. There's failing septic systems in our rural areas, our sanitary sewer pipes. You know, we have aging infrastructure. We still have sanitary sewer overflows when we get large rain events, and then stormwater runoff. Moving across our hardscapes in our urban areas is also contributing to the fecal coliform problem. And really, we talk a lot about fecal coliform, but sediment is considered to be the #1 pollutant in the French Broad River. And sediment is natural, but when you have excessive amounts of sediment in a waterway, it destroys the ecosystem, destroys habitat for aquatic life, but then it's also connected to the fecal coliform problem because the bacteria binds to the sediment particles and then gets carried downstream and throughout the watershed. And every time it rains and the sediment in the bottom of the river gets stirred up, the bacteria levels spike. And so the problems are interconnected. And so we feel like addressing the stormwater runoff, the sediment will also help us address the fecal coliform issue with the French Broad River.
And the sediment piece is so prevalent, like when you go without periods of rain here, right? Like all of a sudden the river and the streams clear up. You know, we're down in the River Arts District and Town Branch, also lovingly known as Nasty Branch. There are days when it is crystal clear and you can see the bottom at where it comes into the French Broad. And but most of the time, given the frequency of rain events here, all that sediment is being kicked up and brought in to the point that Mountain Truth's swim guide, they can actually get their fecal coliform readings off of their turbidity meter because it's so directly correlated. When the sediment is up, the fecal coliform is up. So I think for us at RiverLink, we really keep coming back to, we've got to address the sediment load on this watershed, particularly that's been human-made, human-introduced. So when we look at RiverLink today, we still carry Karen's overarching DNA and vision of this commitment to greenways, parks, and public river access throughout the watershed, right? I mean, that's what RiverLink is really historically known for. We're active partners in the Woodfin Greenway Blueway project, which is extraordinary on so many fronts. We're in the process of bringing on the Greenway phase of Karen Craig Nolan Park down on Amboy. Our founders Park. This was a brownfield that Karen acquired. It had been an auto crushing plant. It's gone through all this remediation the last 10 years, phyto remediation. It's a missing link of greenway down there. And so if you've been down there, we're in construction right now. Hope to dedicate that this first phase at the end of the summer. So we still have a ton of commitment in that space. And then we're also really dedicated to these 3 programmatic areas, which will lead us to more specifics around Renee's work. But we run a beautiful river youth education program. And this is pretty special. Historically, in the school systems, no charge, about 3,500 kids a year. All of these programs have an enormous lens towards equity and access. We're expanding that youth education program into after school and summer, and working with a lot of BIPOC community partners, and always looking to ensure that every child has access to that watershed. So we just brought on an additional educator and are really excited about that. We're also an accredited land trust, and we hold these very special conservation easements at a kind of urban, semi-urban interface. We have some other amazing land trusts in the region that are extraordinary, and they tend to conserve larger contiguous parcels. But we hold quite a few easements, majority of which are watershed specific or related. And then lastly, we run a really robust water resources program that Renee oversees. And I think she's going to take us through a little bit about what are the pressures on the water resources program, and then what are some of the solutions going forward.
Sure. And climate change is also an sort of overarching umbrella that we work underneath and try to address. So we know with climate change that we're already seeing this happen, but our region is expected to have more frequent, intense rain events. And that means more runoff, that means more flooding. And if we can help address some of the stormwater runoff and the millions of gallons of water that it's introducing into our streams during rain events, then we can help mitigate some of the flooding. And I'm going to talk about how we can better manage our stormwater runoff in a way that addresses these issues, but also makes our community more climate resilient. So looking ahead to the future, what are we working towards? What would we like you to help us do? I threw this in there just because I was looking over Buncombe County's strategic plan that they just passed recently, and I was struck by the predicted increase in population that we're looking at in Buncombe County. By 2043, estimates are that our population will increase between 20 to 30%. That's extraordinary.
The current housing pressures we have, that's going to have to be new building and new development and more roofs and more impervious surfaces.
Yeah, and we need more housing, but we also need, as we move forward to implement more housing, we need to balance that new development with environmental protection. And so traditional stormwater management, I've touched on, basically it's a system that's designed to move water in pipes offsite as quickly as possible. What we would advocate for is what's referred to as low impact development, or now more frequently, I hear it called green infrastructure. It's a natural approach to managing stormwater runoff that uses soil and plants to slow that runoff down and give it an opportunity to soak into the ground like it would naturally. So green infrastructure, slow it down, keep it on site, soak it in. That's the mantra that we work by. And this is something that large scale developers can take on, but also all of us as homeowners or renters. We want to disconnect those impervious surfaces. And it could be something as simple as planting a tree in the middle of a public plaza like this. This is a good example of implementing green infrastructure in a public space. You have trees, you have pavers that are permeable and allow the water to soak in.
Yeah, and I always think of like large parking lots or high density neighborhoods with driveways. Like it's amazing if each driveway introduces impervious pavers, or if you really advocate for parking lots to have the occasional break with a natural element versus that sheet runoff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Does anyone recognize this green street in Asheville? Have you ever had a beer at New Belgium? brewery down on the river. Yeah, this is Craven Street. This is Asheville's first, and to my knowledge, only green street. And that just means that the street includes green infrastructure. So on Craven Street, there's permeable pavers, and there are these rain gardens situated along the street that capture the runoff from Craven Street. It used to be piped directly into the French Broad River, but now it's filtered first through the permeable pavers or the rain garden, depending on where you are on the street. This project was a successful collaboration between RiverLink and the city of Asheville. Back in 2017, we helped get some state grant funding to implement this green infrastructure. Could we have more green streets in the city of Asheville? We absolutely can. And the city's recent draft South Slope Vision Plan, they're looking at revisioning and reconfiguring Cox Avenue in downtown Asheville to include multimodal transportation, but also to include some green stormwater infrastructure. So we could have rain gardens, we could have some permeable pavers, we could just even have some street trees that would capture and filter the runoff. And Cox Avenue is of particular importance to us because all of the stormwater from Cox Avenue drains into Nasty Branch, which is listed as impaired. So this could help address some water quality issues in an urban stream that flows through a marginalized community and also is a tributary of the French Broad River. So as this project unfolds, I encourage you to keep an ear out for opportunities to provide public input on this and to advocate for keeping that green stormwater infrastructure piece in the project, because I think if something gets cut ultimately in the end, that will be what it gets removed from the project. Green roofs. We have green roofs in downtown Asheville. This is another example of green infrastructure. This particular site is the Garage Apartments. It's an affordable housing project in downtown Asheville that Public Interest Projects took on a few years ago. So green roofs, Lisa and I were talking about this a while back when we met with staff from Living Roofs, Inc. And Lisa was saying, oh, I thought green roofs were really just aesthetics. But then we learned that
it was blown away when I understood how much gallonage they capture, retain, and don't shed as stormwater.
yeah. And, talk about climate resiliency, having more green roofs, they have a cooling effect on their surroundings. And in terms of, a building owner or a developer, there's a cost savings in the long run. If you implement a green roof on your building, you don't have to replace it as frequently as you would a traditional roof. So you can incur some cost savings there, but then also cost savings in the terms of your cooling cost for the building, because the green roof helps cool the building. But then it also has this amazing stormwater mitigation effect as well.
And most appropriate, you said, for new builds, very hard to retro.
It is hard to retrofit because the engineering that is required, green roofs weigh a lot, right? There's soil and plants up there. So it's much easier to implement this on the front end in a new building than it is to retrofit. And I have a green roof on my husband's, we have a green roof at my house on my husband's woodworking shed. I should include a photo of that in the future. And then as homeowners, simply disconnecting your downspout. Where do your downspouts drain to? It's not something we think about very often. A lot of people may not even know, but many of our homes, our downspouts are piped out onto the street or maybe onto our driveway. And then that's going to lead into a storm drain, and then that's going to get into the nearest stream. So I encourage everyone, if they can, to disconnect their downspout from whatever hard surface it might be draining onto, redirect it onto your lawn. You obviously want to get it away from the foundation of your home. You don't want to cause issues there, but you can redirect it onto your lawn, or you can construct, or you can install a rain barrel and redirect it there. So rainwater harvesting has many benefits. I'm a gardener. I have a couple rain barrels at my home, and, we get a lot of rain here. So there are some times where I don't really need to use the water in my rain barrel for outdoor watering needs. but I can let it slowly trickle out onto my lawn. Again, you're just keeping it on site and giving it an opportunity to soak into the ground.
Can you give an average roof calculation of the runoff coming on downspouts or?
Yeah, so there's an incredible amount of water coming off of your rooftop. A typical rooftop, 1,500 square feet during a 1-inch rain, over 1,000 gallons of water is generated. And we get a lot of rain. We get 42 inches of rain here a year on average. It's often more than that. So that's a lot of rain in a year, a lot of runoff you could keep on site. Maybe you want a rain garden. This is a beautiful aesthetic landscape feature that you could incorporate onto your property, direct your downspouts into this small depression in your yard. It's planted with beautiful native plants, and it doesn't require a lot of space. Surprisingly, we use this 10% rule. If you're directing 10% of your rooftop into the rain garden, or you only need 10% of the area draining into the rain garden. So if you have 1,000 square foot roof, you'd need, would that be 100 square foot of space for a rain garden? And often you may just be directing half of your roof runoff through one downspout, so you could get away with an even smaller footprint.
And I think what's extraordinary about all of these elements are so aesthetically beautiful. Like what's good for the environment is usually really good for people. So any one of these examples is actually like an upgrade, to your home or your community. And I think that's where that win-win. Do you want to take just 1 second and talk about Southside? Because that to me is, your Southside project is one of the most beautiful examples of managing stormwater and creating an amenity.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had a ribbon cutting last week on a green infrastructure project in the Southside community of Asheville. So we worked with the community there to address some unmitigated runoff issues that were negatively impacting a residential parking lot at Erskine Apartments. So it's a Asheville Housing Authority community. And we came together with many partners, funders, to help tackle this issue that was negatively impacting the residents there. But it also helped prevent runoff from entering Nasty Branch, the impaired stream that I mentioned earlier. But this extensive project, we installed rain gardens. There's a beautiful stormwater wetland that the mallard ducks have found and have been hanging out in, as well as
Created a stream bed throughout the entire.
a natural stream bed that runs the entire property, and community amenities. So that's another great thing about the green infrastructure projects. You can also incorporate community amenities, things like walking trails, benches. It can have very much have a park-like feel that everybody can benefit from. And then you also have the water quality benefits as well.
So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we've been, where we are, where we're headed. And I think we ask ourselves every day at RiverLink and when we share with people, like, how do we make a difference? And I think for me, I've been in the West my whole life. So spending the past almost 2 years here in somewhere that's so magnificently water rich, but such an abundance, is really understanding how do we be part of the solution out here where we're so fortunate to have this climate and to have this amount of rainfall. But I think really sharing with people, like, listen, runoff, unmitigated runoff is a huge challenge and threat. And with it, this sediment burden and this ongoing creation of sediment is ultimately compromising the water quality, both from, chemical testing standards to biological, smothering the communities that normally would thrive in these waterways. So I think just recognizing it, knowing it, reading up on it, learning more, and sharing it with others.
Yeah, and there are opportunities locally to voice your concerns and to advocate for better stormwater management. So join stakeholder gatherings, meetings. So for example, City of Asheville has their Sustainability Advisory Committee. Buncombe County has their Commission on Energy and the Environment. Both of those settings offer opportunities for us to advocate for clean water and green infrastructure. We really want to ask more of developers, but it's difficult. So our local development ordinance, which includes the stormwater ordinance, is what dictates the requirements for developers in terms of treating their stormwater runoff once the construction project is complete. And City of Asheville, all municipalities in the state of North Carolina are limited in their ability to make stringent stormwater ordinances. They can't make their ordinance any more restrictive than what the state of North Carolina allows. So it
And
kind
we
of
hold
ties.
such a unique position in the western part of
Yeah.
the state with the amount of rain and mountain mix we have, right? And
that's
so we're this unique entity within this structure. And I think that's where it comes to, for a lot of the developers, or think of what New Belgium did when they came in. They were such a partner on this front, and they went so above and beyond in partnering with organizations like us and with the city and being really innovative and creative in how they manage the excess water and their proximity to the river. And so I think incentivizing developers and businesses, highlighting them, showcasing them, promoting them, supporting them. I mean, we're going to have to go that route versus trying to regulate it.
Yeah, and I go out often and speak to homeowners associations, garden clubs about the work that we're doing, and I advocate for green infrastructure. So yeah, I welcome you to invite these conversations to your community. Feel free to reach out if your HOA would like to learn more about these topics. Be happy to come talk with your community and be an example. Adopt these practices at home. We have something called the Water Rich Guide on our website, and it can walk you through the steps on how to evaluate your property, where the water's going, how can you redirect it somewhere else so it can soak into the ground, step-by-step instructions on how to install a rain barrel, how to build a rain garden, and it also has a list of local contractors that do this type of work. So, all of this means you can be a part of this collective effort to tackle these issues, and you can create the change that we all want to see.
Yeah, and I think, we owe it to Wilma and Jean and Karen to carry this legacy and work forward. And I asked Renee to think about just sort of an inspirational observation around that to share with just our relationship here with water.
Yeah, when I think about how we've been dealing with stormwater management up to this point, we're treating water like it's a nuisance rather than this precious resource that we need to care for to the best of our ability. And so if we could do a better job of viewing water as a precious resource rather than a nuisance and then act accordingly, then I think we could really make major headway in these problems, because it ultimately comes back to bite us, right? We all are affected in some way or another when we mismanage water.
And when she shared that with me, it gave me so much thought, because we're given, through rain, this beautiful, clean, wonderful thing. And on our watch, somehow it's getting, loaded, it's running wild across man-made surfaces, picking up contaminants and sediment, and ultimately loading the watershed. And so it feels like, we'll close here with Wilma's quote, which remains so profound, because just as the river belongs to no one, it belongs to everyone, and everyone is held accountable for its health and condition. So thank you for all that you guys do with your involvement with the Sierra Club and just all that you all do in general, and really appreciate the opportunity to come and share. And we'd love to field any questions or thoughts.
A couple of comments. We want to thank everybody. There are about 60 of us here in the room, and there are about 60 of us, 67 online. So congratulations, you have a huge following. As you question, we want to make sure you get a microphone. Ken is going to read the questions from the chat. And we will turn over to Renee and Lisa. We definitely want to thank Catherine Frank for helping us organize, and for Ollie and all of us for partnering. So Ken.
Yeah, when you have a question, we'll bring the mic to you.
All right, so Steve and Judy, you have the microphone? Is not turned on. Okay.
Okay, well, one mic.
I have one
I
here.
guess he was first.
Okay.
I think these guys, please.
All right. Sorry.
Just the mute button, maybe?
Who was first? I don't know.
Please turn it on though.
Maybe it's not charged.
No, no choice.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think a lot of us know that Asheville is a very flood-prone city. Steep slopes, quick runoff, not enough underground stormwater drainage in the first place. Our streets flood continually. I see why your emphasis on green infrastructure is toward stormwater. However, the concept of green infrastructure is much broader.
Sure.
Probably aware of that. It's the connection of ecosystems and biodiversity, temperature, every green space, every tree, everything in the city is part of green infrastructure. The bioengineering part of it is what you're partly talking about in our drainage waste. But as we look at the city as a whole, we need to think even broader because it's not just water, it's all these other things combined. And I know Karen knew that because I worked with her in the past and we were co-chairs of a Rivers conference. And she was very much in favor of, looking at a big picture of our tree canopy, everything together. So when we talk about that concept, I think we should even think broader, because if people are just focused on the bioengineering part, you kind of lose some of the big picture, because we need corridors, we need all these connections of ecosystems to work together. If we think like that, we get much further along, I think.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question that is targeted on greenways, which we're doing very well with at the present time and have done so in the past. I'd like to ask what we might do better to make greenways environmental leaders in all these areas of green infrastructure than we are now. We have a masterpiece of a greenway in the Wilma Dykeman Greenway at the southern end of our French Broad River riverfront. We have a soon to be under construction additional masterpiece in the Woodfin Greenway and Blueway at the north end, and soon we will be filling in the very strategic space in between, sometimes called the missing mile, because nothing has happened there yet, where we will create a greenway from end to end along the French Broad River. I work with Connect Buncombe in advocating for more greenways, and we're seeing a great deal of new work coming along. But I would like to wonder and ask RiverLink what you think might be done better in terms of making greenways environmental leaders in Asheville.
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of different things come to mind. Our greenways are built along our waterways, right? Because it's flat land. It makes sense, easier to construct. But we have to ensure that we leave enough space that there's a healthy riparian buffer between the river and the greenway, because that riparian buffer serves as like the first filter of overland runoff before it reaches the river. And the trees that make up the riparian buffer help stabilize the stream bank and hold it in place and prevent erosion. I haven't looked into if there are communities in this country using permeable paving. There is permeable asphalt, there's permeable concrete, but there's also problems with that it tends to be high maintenance because it can get clogged over time. And with it being in a floodplain, flood waters and the silt that leaves behind, it may not be realistic to build our greenways out of permeable paving. But I do know in the River Arts District, the Wilma Dykeman Greenway, and part of this was required by our stormwater ordinance, but they did do a good job of, in addition to building the greenway, which is adding more impervious surfaces, right? They tried to counteract that and balance it out by creating these stormwater wetlands. I don't know if you've noticed those along the greenway, but they tried to counteract the addition of impervious surfaces by including these stormwater wetlands that have, detention and are capturing and filtering runoff from the street there. One thing I see coming in the future, we have a project right now that's funded through the Cherokee Preservation Foundation to protect river cane along the French Broad River. It's an important resource for Cherokee artisans, but it's also really important ecologically, and it's disappearing. And in part, it's disappearing and has been for a long time due to development and agriculture. And really, when colonization started taking hold in this area, river cane started disappearing. But utilities, upgrades to the sewer lines, which parallel our waterways, those types of projects, future greenways could be contributing to that problem of river cane disappearing. So I have been trying to plant that seed in the mind of city officials as they plan future greenways, particularly the one along the Swannanoa River. There's a lot of river cane in that area. Let's try to design it so we can protect the river cane, or at least rescue it before it gets bulldozed by construction.
And one other thing, David, thinking about that question is, I think like the River Arts District is a great example where the greenways are like Karen Craignolan Park's greenway is running through a former brownfield, which today is a beautifully designed riverfront park with a climate resilience mindset and landscape. And to your point about, all the development in the floodplain, I think anytime we can get, greenways oftentimes can have the companionship of creating this space that is designed to be part of the environmental solution and not the problem, and putting development further, in harm's way. So I think they tend to lend themselves, hopefully, to going hand in hand with accompanying landscapes that are, helpful to that solution and resilient. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentations. Several years ago, RiverLink had a program of volunteers to have assigned sections of the river or location to take water samples, and then it would be analyzed. And by that technique, I believe some areas where pollution wasn't and then was, you could figure out where that pollution was coming from, whether it was often a farm field, agricultural area. And I wondered if that's still going on. And secondly, from a volunteer effort, I have kayaked with very good friends, many sections of the French Broad. And in the agriculture area, you would see cows in the river or banks just worn down by cattle. And if that's noticed, if that could be reported in a volunteer effort and figure out where this farmer is not going by the rules he should with his farm pond runoff and cows and cattle and pigs and so forth.
Yeah. So couple issues there. The water quality testing now, I don't know, I'm not familiar with RiverLink's water quality testing program prior to me being at RiverLink, but now Mountain True, another local environmental nonprofit, has taken the lead, and the Environmental Quality Institute in Black Mountain. Those are the two major organizations leading the efforts to monitor water quality. And so Mountain True's typically primarily focuses on the bacteria issue. And then the Environmental Quality Institute, also known as EQI, has this volunteer network called VWIN, and you can volunteer to collect water samples for them on a monthly basis. And they sample for a broader range of pollutants. And all of that data is available on their website, but then also Mountain True has their swim guide that you can go to and see what the bacteria levels are like in the river that week, and you can determine whether or not you want to recreate in it. And then the second part was the farmers. Okay, yes, it's a very complicated issue. It's not illegal to let your livestock drink water from the river or from a stream. And there are groups working like Buncombe County Soil and Water Conservation District and others to get farmers the resources that they need to fence their cattle out, because it's not just the cost of building a fence. It's also, you have to provide them with an alternative water source. And sometimes that means digging a well. And so it is cost prohibitive for some farmers, but there is a lot of funding out there to help them cover those costs. Yeah, I think only if their operation is just causing a really egregious water quality issue is it, would NCDEQ step in and like force something to happen? But in general, yeah, it's a complicated issue for sure.
Okay, actually a follow-up question from Jay online,
Yeah.
who asked if there's water quality testing in the tributaries going into the French Broad.
Absolutely. Yeah. Many of the tributaries.
Okay, one other question is, came from online is RiverLink working with a municipal golf course to include stormwater management as part of all the work that's going on there?
I know that upgrades to the stormwater infrastructure is a part of the upgrades to the municipal golf course. I actually have a meeting with that project manager tomorrow to talk about some of the options there to improve their stormwater management. So I guess to be seen what ultimately is done, but they do have an opportunity there to make improvements.
And a follow-up question as well, if you're driving down the street and you see new development and they have those water catching fences across, but there's huge runoff coming and they're not being effective, is there something to call?
Sure.
Place?
Yeah, there's a hotline. If it's in the city limits, you want to call the City of Asheville Sediment and Erosion Hotline. They're there on weekends as well. And you call and report where you saw it. And then their inspectors will go to the site and let the developer know that they're not in compliance. And then Buncombe County also has that, the same resource if it's not in the city limits.
Could you send that to me and we'll
Sure.
post it on our website for you guys to know?
Absolutely.
Yes, I've got a quick question. Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you so much for it. The question is, going back to the fecal coliform and turbidity or sedimentation from an ecology perspective. I mean, I think I know that the fecal coliform, if you drink the water, you're going to get sick, right? So there's that. But if you could just share some thoughts about just the farther reaching ecological problems around whether it's the fecal coliform issue, for, organisms other than humans, or kind of the same thing for the sediment. Just what are the ecological, negative consequences that are really happening there?
Right. Yeah. The fecal coliform itself, I believe, is primarily a human health concern, but it can be an indicator of other harmful organisms that are getting, if it's an indicator of raw sewage getting into the waterways, then that has other negative implications. But the sediment, having excessive sediment in the river, it suffocates, it destroys habitat, basically from, the animals at the bottom of the food chain, and then that works its way up. So the aquatic insects that the fish feed from, the sediment suffocates them. It prevents fish from being able to see well and to hunt for their prey. It can clog their gills. It can affect their immune system and make them more susceptible to disease. And sediment binds to the bacteria and holds on to it and can disperse it throughout the watershed. But then it also binds to things like heavy metals. And so you can, so it's problematic in a wide variety of ways. And, you know,
Complete absence of species like mussels or something that would be
Yeah.
there naturally.
right. Yeah. The freshwater mussels that were so abundant. This is a center of biodiversity for freshwater mussels, the French Broad River and the Tennessee River Basin. And they are nature's natural filter for our rivers. But they're very sensitive to sediment. And that's why they're largely absent from the French Broad River now. But if we had healthy freshwater mussels, they could help us with the bacteria problem because they can filter it and they can break it down. Yeah, great. No. Great question. Yeah.
I have a question. Like the golf courses where you have basically grass, there's an enormous amount of lawns in this region. And I'm wondering, is there work that is being done either in collaboration with you to try and get more wildflower meadows to replace that? Or is it just so locked in that you're never going to really try and see any conversion?
Yeah. I mean, lawns are technically permeable, so they're not impervious, but they're bad ecologically for a lot of other reasons, because, you know, a lot of people treat their lawns with herbicides and too much fertilizer, and all of that can be a source of pollution for our waterways. But yeah, I mean, our partner organizations like Asheville Greenworks, they do a lot of advocacy and hands-on work promoting pollinator meadows. There's some local businesses that have popped up. Patchwork Meadows comes to mind, that they're going out and helping people convert their lawn to meadows. And we included some meadows in our Southside Green Infrastructure project that we did at Erskine Apartments.
Yeah, and Karen Craig-Nolan Park will be all done with native meadow grasses, so it'll be a different looking park than the others. And I think for us, the one thing that we're really, if it's not sediment we're whipped up over, it's the mowing of riparian zones that we're whipped up over. So maybe more so than lawns in general, if you own property and you have proximity to water, please, please, please leave a buffer. And I think that's maybe the greater challenge with home ownership, is because if you do have, or any development with adjacency to water, you know, we like to see the water, we like to interact with the water. But I think our biggest call to action, we just had a blog out on let it grow, don't mow, and like just really trying to advocate to please leave all the riparian zones intact, small to large, on the different watersheds, because I think that ultimately is part of that huge sediment loading, you know, flood resiliency. And so I think for RiverLink, that's really where we lean in on that piece.
Working now? Yeah. About the designation of the river being impaired because of all the E. coli. Two-part question. One is, did the news get out to the tourist people in the big cities, and has it affected tourism negatively? And then part of the same question is the tubing companies. Are they looking forward to a summer of decreased business because of this? Of course, it's been cool so far, but I'm wondering about that too.
Yeah, we belong to the French Broad River Partnership, and that's an amazing place for these conversations, because you have, you know, the outfitters care tremendously about water quality and conservation, and they're, you know, working in that space. And like, I mean, it was just in front page of the Citizen Times, right, last week, like this week, fecal coliform 8 times EPA level. Like, it's constantly in the press. But I think there's a disconnect, and that's what takes us back to that conundrum, right? Like, here's this economic engine to the region, and the waters and the rivers at the heart of it, yet life kind of marches on. And I don't believe, I know the outfitters, the ones that I've talked to at the French Broad River Partnership, they're super communicative and responsible, you know, with their customers. They follow the swim guide and keep that information out there and share that with customers. But I think on a more global scale, what you're speaking to, Richard, is like, there is a disconnect, I think, between the tourism industry and that impairment. And we keep at RiverLink wanting to use that kind of to our benefit, you know, in talking to the powers that be here, like, look at what we've built on this outdoor recreation on this resource. We've got to do better by it, you know? And I mean, I personally think that impairment is a black eye. I mean, that's 19 miles from Long Shoals up into Woodfin.
I want to add a couple of questions, comments from online. One is, there was a comment about what a wonderful job the Arboretum has done with the retention ponds and what a great situation that is. And the second one is that we all need to be keeping our eyes on developers and reporting those problems. That the city doesn't have the inspectors to do it. It depends on all of us.
That's right. Yeah, the city is understaffed, like a lot of entities in terms of having enough staff to go out and inspect those on a regular basis. So that, yeah, rely on community engagement around those issues. Yeah, and also UNC Asheville has done an incredible job of managing stormwater, implementing low impact development. If you drove up Campus Drive from Broadway, then you drove past their facilities maintenance building, and it has rainwater harvesting system that they use to flush the toilets inside the building. It has a green roof. It has rain gardens. And those sort of features are kind of scattered throughout campus, and, you know, very much have an intact canopy here on campus. They've done a really good job, and I think serve as a model for what other college campuses could do.
Two quick questions. I was intrigued by the rain garden idea, but I worry about breeding mosquitoes. If you could speak to that, I'd appreciate it. And the second question, and they're both quick, is a green rooftop compatible with rooftop solar panels?
Oh, okay. Yes. So rain gardens, part of the design process is to do an infiltration test to make sure that your soil will percolate that water within 3 days. So mosquito larvae, you know, from the time they're laid until they develop into a biting mosquito, it's like 5 to 7 days, depending on the species of mosquito. Your rain garden will drain before the mosquitoes have an opportunity to mature. If you do your percolation test and it doesn't drain within 5 to 7 days, then it's not a good site for a rain garden. And
You
then
also invite birds and all kinds of other, but you invite a whole little.
you do, you'll get dragonflies come to your rain garden and other wildlife. So you could create a system that kind of keeps the mosquitoes in check as well. But I'm not familiar with green roofs and solar panels, but I know someone who probably is. So I'm going to give him the mic.
I've been working on agrivoltaics, which are elevated solar panels on farms, but there's a research program that NREL's been sponsoring in Colorado, which does look at rooftop green roofs with panels that are on, because you need a flat roof, obviously. The panels are slightly off so that they can allow the rain to drop on the green roof, but you get the solar as well. And if anybody's interested, I have citations and reports, so maybe I'll give them to Dave.
One comment and one question. This roof, this building we're in has a solar roof on it. So, you know, let's give UNC a round of applause for that. And the people that attended Raleigh who helped fund it. So that's exciting. The question was, can we require greater setbacks along the river between the development and the river?
That has been brought up multiple times for many years. I think right now the setback is it 30 feet? You can't build within 30 feet of the top of the stream bank, and you're not supposed to cut the vegetation down within that 30 feet unless it's an invasive, non-native invasive plant. But yeah, that rule doesn't really get followed. Yeah, increase the buffer width. It hasn't taken hold yet, but the idea has been presented many times.
Yeah, unfortunately, the state of North Carolina went from having a 100-foot buffer for streams to 50 feet, and now I think it's down to 30. So I don't know if we have the ability to have something more stringent than the state or not.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of pushback we would get from the state on that, because there are watersheds in North Carolina that have buffer rules, and the buffer width is much wider. I think it might be 100 feet, but those are watersheds in which the river serves as a drinking water source. And so there's a lot more incentive to ensure that water is clean, and riparian buffers are a big part of that. And so if you live in a watershed that has a buffer rule, you cannot develop or cut the vegetation within, I want to say it's 100 feet of the top of the stream bank. But the French Broad River is not a drinking water source. We do not have buffer rules here other than what's in our development ordinance that says you can't build within, I think it's 30 feet at the top of the stream bank. Yeah.
Well, okay, we want to say thank you. That was exceptional presentation. So great. I want to invite all of you, if you are not on our email list, please go to our website, just WNC, Western North Carolina, WNCCRclub.org. And over on the right, put in that you are interested in the email and give us your information. What? It's every other Saturday. It's under my name, Judy Maddox. Do check your spam, because I don't know, my email, anyway, check your spam. Do want to invite you to our picnic, July 22nd, and do want to invite you to the first Wednesday always for the rest of the year and the rest of our life we're partners now with Ollie, and they are super wonderful. 7 o'clock here. If you're interested in our leaders group and discussion, we meet upstairs at 5 o'clock right before this meeting, and we welcome you. My name and email is on our website, and just let me know and I'll send you the link. If you need to be on Zoom, that's hybrid up there, in person and hybrid. So, and I would like to get your information, sir, on the roof and the solar and whatever. So thank you all. Appreciate you guys coming.